know, but I hadn't seen my son yet.
Mm-hmm.
They had taken him and were working on him, and then she brought him to me, and I saw his face, and I just knew that he needed to go.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The tears are good. I used to not feel the tears,
Mm-hmm.
so that's part of this whole story. But I used to block all my emotion and just like, do this is what we have to do. Especially
Yeah.
in critical care, like
You gotta
you
be
just
tough.
do, yeah.
Yeah.
So
You gotta stay focused
yeah,
and just right.
yeah. So I honor the tears when they come.
That's great.
Yeah. So he went to the NICU, and of course.
This is your brother Shamar with Ancient Watchman. We have a special guest today. She's actually a nurse, and she's gonna walk us through her journey into plant medicine, sacred medicine, psychedelic world, and all of that. So I want everybody to understand that perspective coming from an actual nurse, Western medicine. So with that said, tell us your name, give us a little bit of your background and all that. So
Okay.
take it away.
Yeah, I'm Cindy Jacobson. I'm from Southern Utah, St. George, and my background is deep, but to keep it on point, I'm a nurse and worked in Western medicine for 22 years. Um, and I love it. I'm a healer at heart, and it just calls to my soul. And so I love the medical field. I love working with people. I love healing people. Um, and it was my passion. I would work all the extra shifts. I would, anytime the unit called and was
Right.
like, we're, desperate.
Just available.
Right,
Right.
right. So, yeah. And my journey went from pediatrics to surgery for 7 years. And then eventually my oldest daughter was born 9 weeks premature. And so she was in the NICU. And as I was finishing up my nursing degree,
Right.
she was born in the NICU. And I'm like, I love surgery. I thought that would be my passion. I thought I was going to just stay there. But after, seeing the compassion from those nurses working with those babies and just, I'm like, okay, I'm open to the NICU.
Right.
And as soon as I graduated, that opportunity became available, so
Nice.
I moved over there and um, worked in the newborn ICU, which was amazing.
I bet. A lot of energy and all that, right?
And there's nothing like working with babies, right? I mean,
I'm assuming.
everybody has a passion for what field they're drawn to.
I was gonna say that you gotta be like really passionate to like be working with children because it's not for everybody. Kind of like a teacher, like a preschool teacher, you gotta really love children, right?
Absolutely, and it's a whole different ball game if you're working, say, ICU end of life care when you know the person is lived a life and and it's hard. Death is always hard, but
of course,
versus that person has lived a life and experienced life versus the beginning of life and that baby struggling, and then if they maybe don't make it, that's a whole another thing to go through. So
another level of grief and all that.
Right. So I highly, highly, highly have compassion for all the people working in that field, because they're very.
It takes a toll. I'm assuming it takes an emotional toll on you because you're dealing with like all these little lives.
Yes.
Right.
And
they're very
so
vulnerable.
Fragile.
Right.
One little mistake in the medical field
Wow.
on those little tiny babies, and could be devastating. So it's very, very good, imperative work. I mean, it all is, but
right, exactly.
So working in the newborn ICU, as I said, my oldest was born 9 weeks premature. She was in the NICU. She actually had a heart, I'll just keep it layman's terms, so she had a hole in her heart.
Wow.
and they didn't discover it right away.
You can use the technical terms
Okay,
too,
PDA,
so that
yes. So I'm just not sure who the audience is, so I want to kind of just repeat it.
They can Google it.
Perfect. So she had a hole in her heart that went undiscovered for a couple weeks, and she was struggling. And you know, there was a few times that we witnessed them do CPR on her, and when she's, you know, 3 pounds, and you're witnessing them resuscitate your child, like that takes a toll. But thankfully, there was a wonderful nurse that discovered it. A nurse found it, not the doctor. And at first, the doctor's like, "No, I don't think so." And she's like, I hear this coming, you know."
Yeah.
So eventually, they did a scan and found out that she did in fact have a hole in her heart, and they took care of it. There's a medication that's wonderful. It takes care of usually about.
I'm glad they found the hole.
Yes,
right?
yes, because we didn't know what was going to happen with her. But they did find the hole, and they gave her medication, and she recovered very quickly and came home on oxygen for a while. But she's grown to a beautiful.
But I'm assuming that you went through like a state of fear, like, because I mean, fragile babies, life could last like in a blink of an eye.
Absolutely, that was definitely terrifying time.
Right.
So, but that did draw me into the NICU. And so I continued working there and had another son. He was born 4 weeks early, but luckily he was fine.
He made it. He was a warrior.
Yeah, he was a warrior. He
Nice.
came right home. It's funny because he's my biggest baby, and he still is. He's 16 and he's 6'4". So,
wow.
But luckily he came a month early. But
that's good.
And then my third child was born. He was only 3 weeks early, but he was born with pneumonia.
Oh man.
And I'm like thinking, oh, this is, you know, my healthiest child. I got further along than the others. We're going to be free, you know. And so when the nurses said, you know, he needs to come to NICU like that, I'm like, no, you know. And I'm still post-delivery, like not really coherent. And I'm like, you know, we have a protocol of transition time, and I'm like, I want his transition time. And the nurse's like, I don't really think that's a good idea. And I'm like, well, I want it. It's protocol. We can do it, you know.
Yeah, because you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I do. I know. But I hadn't seen my son yet. They you know, they had taken him and were working on him. And then she brought him to me, and I saw his face, and I just knew that he needed to go.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The tears are good. I used to not feel the tears, so that's part of this whole story. But I used to block all my emotion and just like, this is what we have to do, you know, especially in critical care. Like you just tough. Do, yeah. So
you gotta stay focused and just
So I honor the tears when they come.
That's great.
So he went to the NICU, and of course, you know, they did. I trusted them fully. They handed him to me, and when I saw him, I'm like, take him, because I knew that you know he needed to go. The 6 hours of transition wouldn't have done him, and ended up he had pneumonia, so he needed to be on antibiotics. And when I got to the NICU after my recovery and I could feel my legs again, they took me in there, and they're wheeling in what we call a giraffe, which was the Taj Mahal of incubators for babies at the time. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, I'm thinking, you know, he's going to be on CPAP, which is just, I mean, most people know what CPAP is. It just opens up your airways. And knowing our protocols, that's what I'm thinking I'm going into. And instead, they're wheeling in a ventilator, and they're wheeling in a giraffe.
So it sounds like it's getting worse?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So,
so at that moment, you're kind of like wondering, like, what's going on? Like,
right. Because I'm like, he's my furthest along baby. Like, he can't be. Usually the giraffe and the ventilator are for the younger gestations, you know, like 28 weeks, 32 weeks, like those kind of weeks is what you think of for this kind of equipment. So as I'm seeing it come in, I'm like, what's going on here? You know, I think he's just here to get some help opening up his lungs, and ended up he had pneumonia, and so they put down the breathing tube, the intubation tube, and they administered surfactant, which is a slippery substance that opens up your airway, your lungs, and it works very well usually. And then he just needed a lot of times we can put the tube down, administer the surfactant, and take it
Mhm.
out, but that wasn't the case for him. He needed to keep the tube in.
For a little longer.
Yeah,
Right.
and so at that point, I was just emotionally, mentally, physically exhausted.
I can only imagine.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I trust you guys with my life because that is my life, my heart outside of my body.
That's right. It's a good time.
And so I, went to my postpartum room, and we do a thing in the newborn ICU. Like there's studies behind it and everything where we have the mothers wear a cloth on their chest,
Mm-hmm.
and then we take the cloth to the baby in the incubator, whatever, so they start that bonding there.
Right,
they
they
get
used to the smell, the mom, the hormones, pheromones.
Exactly. Right. And then we do the opposite in reverse, so then the mom can start producing the milk and feeling connected to the baby.
Nice.
And so knowing this, I had bought him a Froggy Binky, and
before we go into that, I know people are wondering, people that are watching this interview are wondering about your dots. Can I show your dots a little bit?
Oh, yes, yeah, absolutely.
So we're gonna talk about these dots because I know people are wondering like, why are those dots there? Like that's basically what the interview is gonna go into in a minute. But go ahead.
Yes. So took the Froggy Binky. I asked my husband to take the Binky down to him, and I had worn it against my chest, and so when I was ready to go back down and see him again, the nurses had seen that Froggy Binky, and they got him froggy blankets and little froggy sockies and had him decked out in this giraffe.
Wow.
In frogs.
Right.
And it's so warming to your heart as a mom because you're so terrified of what's happening.
What
with your
would
child.
happen, or what could it be, right?
Yeah, and usually in a medical hospital, like it's all sterile, like white blankets,
yeah,
right? Everything's sterile.
Right.
And so in our NICU, and I think they use this practice a lot of NICUs, but we have blankets that are homey, like just soft and cute, and
they feel like something like at home, familiar.
Yes.
Right.
And then, of course, like with the little babies, the little girls, we like to put a little bow on, so when the moms come in, it's not like all this equipment that's overwhelming and they're terrified of their baby. They see their baby as a baby.
Right.
And so that's what they had done for me with my son, and that image of him in that big giraffe with the ET tube and all the lines coming out of him.
Must be terrifying.
Well, for me it wasn't. It was just so heartwarming to see him, because I know that those nurses wrapped him in love that they would do for their own child.
Mm-hmm.
Having him in, they saw the Frog Binky, so we have a lot of blankets to choose from, but they found ones that connected.
That's pretty interesting.
So
right.
So they have huge hearts there. So fast forward, he was in NICU for 5 days, came home completely healthy, happy, like this boy, if you could ask for a baby, like more perfect baby you couldn't, because he was just content, slept through the night at 10 weeks, happy, smiling, like ear to ear,
no crying, nice,
just radiating
just
light.
life.
Yes,
right.
Just radiating light, and there's just so amazing.
So I bet that brought comfort to you, knowing that you were in that situation. That kind of like brought a little comfort in that situation. Huh?
Absolutely,
right.
Yes, absolutely. So fast forward to him being 4 months old, and of course I'm working NICU, went back to work by then, and one day I was home with him, but he was taking a nap, and he slept, like I say, he slept through the night, like when I say baby. Slept through the night, like 10, 12 hours a night, and then his naps would be 3 to 4 hours long, and this was not untypical for him.
So you started to get worried, or?
No, I wasn't worried. I mean, because that's his. Initially I wasn't worried because that was his pattern. But this one day I'm like, okay, he's sleeping. I like to get stuff done when baby sleeps. So I'm cleaning, cooking, helping my playing with my other children, doing things with them. And it's starting to get dinner time, and I'm cooking dinner, and I'm like, wait a minute, like, when did we put him down? And it was just like But I'm still not like really tuning into it because I'm busy with dinner, and I have my kids at the bar, eating snacks while I'm preparing. And I asked my oldest daughter, who was 5 at the time, she was a very good mommy helper.
Nice.
And she loved to help change diapers, feed, anything she could
That's
do.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, hey, could you go check on your brother? And she didn't because, you know, she was eating and fine. So I'm like, okay, go check on him. And he wasn't breathing. And being a nurse, I knew like it had been a while.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I got the chills.
Yeah. So it's probably close to when I first laid him down. And so I knew there was no resuscitating him, but I tried anyway. And
Take your time. Take your time. It's all right.
so when I eventually tried calling 911, I'm just screaming, screaming in the phone, my baby's dead.
Oh my gosh, right.
And apparently the operator couldn't understand me.
Oh my gosh, don't you hate that?
Yeah, and I'm just screaming like, why don't you understand me? My baby's dead.
Right.
And she's like trying to calm me down, and she's like, is there somebody else there that can take the phone? And the only other person is my 5-year-old daughter.
Daughter, right.
So I had her the phone, and she just says, my baby's dead.
Right.
And
I'm pretty sure it was really tough for your daughter to like
Yeah.
even utter those words
right.
at such a young age. Like nobody should be.
Well, and at her age, she didn't really understand what that meant. She didn't understand, you know,
Like-
she knew like something was wrong, but what is death at 5 years
Yeah,
old,
that's
you
true.
know? So she just said it like kind of like nonchalant, like my baby's dead, because she understood what I was saying. And so without going, I mean, I could go on that all day long, but to keep it on topic, after my son passed, you know, of course, being a nurse, I'm like racking my brain, like what caused his SIDS? Why? Why did this happen? How could I have saved my son?
Yeah, you begin to ask the tough questions,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And so, of course, you know, research out there is we don't know what happens. It just happens. But I don't believe that. I think there's a reason for everything. So I just started researching more and more and going down every rabbit hole I could.
Right.
And the one that just kept coming. And of course, I didn't want to look at that one because I'm Western medicine. I'm pro-vaccine. I, you know, would look down my nose at any parent that didn't want to vaccinate as they were unintelligent and uninformed.
Right. You were judgmental.
Yeah, very
right?
judgmental because I knew the vaccines are.
Yeah, because of the Western mindset. Because you're a nurse.
Yes,
you went
I'm
to
a
school
nurse.
for it.
Yeah.
You know. You understand.
I studied it. I know.
Right.
I know.
You
this
know
is
the
right
facts,
way.
right?
I know
You
the
know the
facts.
facts.
This is what the right thing to do is. So once my eyes started opening up to that, I like started tuning into that, and I'm like, you know, it took a while because you don't want to. First of all, you don't want to think you caused harm to your own child. And second of all, still being a nurse in Western mindset and giving vaccinations daily to babies, it took a while for me to tune into that. But one time I had this image appear in my mind as I'm thinking about it, and the last time I remember my baby alive, I had a TLC nurse at my home diagnosing my 2-year-old son with autism.
Wow.
And I just remember that image of my 4-month-old on a blanket doing tummy time and my 2-year-old and the TLC nurse. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, my 2-year-old, he had been meeting every milestone. He was talking early, walking early, was perfectly healthy boy.
Right.
And all of a sudden he stopped talking and he started typical signs of autism and, you know, like repetitive movements and just screaming.
Screaming out of nowhere, right?
Yes. And the nurse told me, oh yeah, he's got severe autism. He may never talk. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I don't believe that because he was talking.
Wow.
And so it just didn't resonate with me. And all the literature out there says one thing, and we are taught one thing
right.
as a Western medicine practitioner. And it wasn't sitting right with me.
Mhm.
And that's when that image came to me, and I'm like, okay, so my son was meeting every milestone, my baby was perfectly happy, and what happened right before all of that? They got their vaccinations.
Hmm.
My son got his form of
So,
vaccination.
so what you're saying is that at some point, your children were healthy, right? They were fine, and all of a
Right.
sudden, there's a point where you vaccinate your
Yes.
children, right?
Yes.
And then from there on, something happened, something changed, right?
Yes. Exactly. No,
Hmm.
there was no other changes other than vaccinations.
And that's interesting that you say that because obviously everybody knows that the whole world was shut down, went in quarantine, and there was mandates all over the world to vaccinate people. And there's a lot of stories. You're just one of them. There's tons of stories uh, where these vaccination causes certain things in your biology, in your body, your mind. So I understand that.
Yes. Yeah, that's huge this last couple years.
Right.
Yeah, but me opening up to that idea was a hard process because it's a whole like mind shift and flip in your belief system, right?
Right.
And it took a while, and
You begin to question like your Western mindset, right? Is that
right.
what happened?
I
Or
don't
that
know.
happened
That
later on?
wasn't then, no.
Okay,
But I
okay.
was questioning like, let's just hurry and vaccinate babies so young.
Hmm.
I'm like, why not wait? Why not wait till they're 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years? Let their brains develop, things like that. So that's where my mind was at that point.
Mm.
Um, and I did stop my 2-year-old son's routine vaccinations and started
Nice.
him on some things that I had researched that could maybe help detox his system. And and at 4 years old, like he was going to early Head Start because of his autism.
Right.
But by probably 5, 6,
Hmm.
he was ahead of the curve, way
Nice.
beyond. No more signs of
Recovering.
autism. Recovering,
Right.
yeah.
Hmm.
So going from 2 years old, saying that he may never talk, he's severely autistic. We're
According
doing
to the Western medicine,
yes,
right?
according to
Mhm.
everything that they were saying and that they've
Right.
been taught and trained.
Hmm.
And of course, we did do early intervention things with him,
That's good.
but for him to be where he is now, like from what they said and what his path would be,
Two different
Yeah,
stories.
yeah.
So it didn't fit
It didn't
the status quo, the ideology
Exactly.
that you're used to, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, for right now at this point, and I didn't see it then, but at this point, I fully believe it was the vaccinations and stopping them and getting him on a healthy diet and routine, and also the early intervention helps too. But he's super intelligent,
Nice.
and yeah. So fast forward a little more. After 4 years after my son passed, well, 3.5 years after my son passed, my husband ended up taking his life. He was also a nurse. He had struggled with what we diagnose as mental illness in society. Um, most, probably all of his life, but I only know, what I know about. And it does run in their family of some mental illness things. But, and he had struggled quite a bit throughout our marriage and took some attempts, but I was able to talk him down pretty easily until we lost our son.
Did you guys deal with like while he was struggling with mental illness? Do you guys dive into the Western medicine as far as like antidepressant and all that stuff?
No.
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 Okay. He wasn't taking none of that.
No. Mm-mm. Well, not until right before he ended up taking his life, but he was just going down a darker and darker hole, and he was able to hide it really well, I will say, for the most part. But
Well,
eventually, it just took him over, and then we did try to get him on medication, and they, it was very shortly after he started medication that he was successful at his attempts. He had taken multiple severe attempts in his life, and so that's another thing that kind of stood out to me because they say, the first couple weeks on an antidepressant can be bad for somebody that's
Yeah.
been depressed, because then they feel like that little bit of oomph to actually go through with their plan of
Right. It kind of like angers me a little bit because I was diagnosed with depression, mild depression, way back in the days when I was like 15, 16. And I went to the doctor. They gave me a box, a huge box, big with like red pills. But then I flipped it over and I started reading the side effects. And so I'm like, wait a minute, this is antidepressant, but yet it's saying that it can cause you to actually commit the
right,
deed.
right.
So it's like,
Takes you the opposite
right.
direction. It's
So
like,
what
is
is
this
really
really
going
beneficial?
on? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's huge, and that's still one that, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And if you read all those side effects or listen to them on the commercials, right, it's like, hey, we're going to stop your sweaty palms, but here's the list of side effects down to including death. And it's like,
Right.
okay, I think I'll deal with sweaty palms. But
Exactly.
it's like we're so programmed to just be like, oh, I don't like the sweaty palms, let's go and get a pill for it.
Exactly.
But
and it's like everybody runs to the immediate solution, which is
right.
the FDA approval
Yes.
medicine,
Yes,
right? Which is
that's
really drugs. And I always tell this to people, and a lot of people don't really understand, especially like people from your field, the medical field, with the Western medicine. When someone like myself tells them, like, well, there's another alternative. It's just like it's taboo for them, right?
right. Yeah, it is, especially if you're a practitioner of Western medicine, right?
Yeah.
That's
You're very professional. This is the
yes.
facts. This is the
Right.
science.
Yeah, and I went to school for this. I know
Right.
it. Like I
You
can
don't know what you're
research
talking
it.
about.
Yeah, it's yeah, for sure. So after losing my husband, yeah, I ended up just fighting through everything, but continuing working, single mom of 3 kids, working hard, like to take care of everything and pretend I'm okay, right? And instead I'm just like stuffing all that trauma down. Like I went back to work almost immediately after losing my son. I'm like, I just got to get back in the saddle and go work with the babies again, and
Right.
and then same with my husband. I just went right back to work, and just pretended
You
life
have to
was
be
fine.
strong. You have to pretend to be
Yeah,
strong, right?
yeah, and especially for my children, I felt like I couldn't cry in front of them. Had to like just make their life as roses and butterflies as possible, not realizing that actually stuffing my trauma down is causing more pain.
More pain and a lot of more illnesses that come with
Exactly.
it because of the turmoil that's like
Yes.
bottled
It's
deep
bottled
inside.
inside of your body, and where does it go? Emotion is energy. So as I'm stuffing all those tears and all the anger and all the sadness,
right?
like
And the whys.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, I'm just stuffing it down and like making my body hold on to that.
Eventually, that led to what?
Led to me getting autoimmune diseases, and not just one, but multiple.
And I think this is, sorry to interrupt, I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of people go to the doctor to get diagnosed because they have these, that, and the third. But then a lot of people don't realize that all that could stem from like emotional seclusion or
right.
turmoil within that. It's just deep within it that a lot of us suppress it because we want to appear a certain way to the outside world, to our family, to our friends, to our coworkers, and all that stuff. But like you said, all that emotional turmoil literally creates sicknesses.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. Um, I didn't know that though, and
Right.
I was going to all the doctors, and the more doctors I went to, the more diagnoses they were giving me, the more sick I got, and they were separating me apart and sending me to specialist after specialist after specialist, and I'm like, there's no way that I can have this list of 1 in a million diseases. I'm not that rare. Like, I'm just human. Like,
Right.
you can't say I have all these 1 in a million diseases and it's not stemming from something.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, can't you just look at me as a whole being? Like, I'm not my liver. I'm not, my leg that needed surgery. I'm not whatever, like, piece that you're taking me, my kidneys. They actually sent me to Mayo Clinic, and that's an intense experience if anybody knows anything about Mayo Clinic, but they literally just separate you and piece you apart,
Yeah.
and try to pinpoint and fix it not coming together as a whole.
As a collective, because the body functions as a collective, right?
Yes.
The heart cannot function without the brain cannot function without the gut.
Yep.
and all those systems, nervous system,
Yes.
and all those, right?
They all run synergistically, like and you have to look at it as a whole. You can't just, oh, here's your problem, take this pill. And then you go over here and you're having another problem that may be related to that pill and something else, but since you're now need to go to a cardiovascular doctor, they're not looking at all this other part of you that you are.
Right.
But the biggest part that they aren't looking at is the inside, the person, the experiences they've lived, the trauma they've been through, because mental illness is so taboo.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants to talk about it, and depression.
Especially in men, I think us men, like we're taught in the society, I think it's everywhere, but we're
Yes.
taught that men are supposed to be tough.
Right.
We're supposed to be like, oh, I'm a manly man, you know.
Yeah.
Like we're not supposed to show our emotions. So
Right.
and so I think that's part of where we see society being like unbalanced and sick because of that emotional unbalance
Absolutely.
within the male.
Absolutely.
I think also happens within the female because, like you said earlier, you're talking about you have to be strong for your children because of what you went through. So you have to like put up this face, right?
Yes. Yeah. And take on all the roles of the father and the mother, the masculine side, the feminine side,
Right.
and you have to just power through sometimes, and so you kind of suppress that energy. But yeah, when you relate to men and boys, like, I mean, think about it from a young age. They're like, a boy falls down, it's like, oh, get up, you're tough, you're fine, don't
Yeah,
cry,
don't
don't be
cry.
a sissy. Where it's a girl, oh, it's okay, come here, I'll hug you,
Right.
I'll hold you. We're taught from that young.
It's a divisive mindset, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah.
And I think that divisive mindset, I was talking to this lady last night. Uh, that even when you look at the clothes from women, you can see women's clothing are more like intricate, made. They got flowers. It's more well thought of. Whereas you go and shop for men, it's like plain, like shirt, plain nothing. It's just there.
Yeah.
So
that's
it has very layers to that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. You're very right. Yeah. So as I'm getting sicker and still working, in the NICU, and I was the charge nurse, so that's even more intense because you're now
More
in charge of the whole
responsible.
unit, plus any babies that are being born, plus any babies that have been born and have problems.
Plus, you're dealing with all that stuff that happened to you, and
Right. And my youngest daughter, so I missed this part, but I ended up having a fourth child after my son passed, and so she wasn't quite 2 when her dad passed. But she would say to me every day, "Mom, why do you have to go to work?" I'm like, "Well, honey, the babies need me."
Mm-hmm.
She's like, "Well, Mom, I need you." And I'm like, "But you're okay. You're healthy. You're fine. These babies are sick. They need me to take care of them. Mom, I need you to take care of me." And I didn't see that at the time. I see that now. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I'm like, no, this
so
is
focused.
Yeah, like I've got to take care of these babies, and it's important, and my job is so important, and I have to be there. Not realizing how much my own children needed me, and how much, and not realizing like, hey, I step out of that role, and somebody else is stepping right into it.
Right.
But if I step out of the mom role, who's going to step into that?
Nobody. Right.
And so, and that was an analogy that came in later after this process, but I know that added to my sickness because I was being separated, like from my heart. Like my heart was there with my daughter.
Right.
My brain was, I need to go rescue.
So you find yourself in a battle, like a internal turmoil battle within yourself. Exactly. Like you're dividing yourself now.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And didn't realize that at the time, but it's just I'm getting more and more sick, and I remember now consciously thinking that I will not stop unless I am made to stop. Like, unless something takes my physical health from me, I am going to continue just working all these shifts, doing all these things. But inside I was so exhausted, and I just wanted to be with my children. I was dying inside.
Yeah, you were dying inside.
And so I literally called that into myself. I'm like, I won't stop until I'm dead. I said that. I said those words. I have a grandmother who I absolutely love and adore, and she was always like, you push through everything, you push through everything, and that's a great mentality to a degree.
Right, to a degree, to a certain degree.
Yeah, but that was my mindset. I'm like, I won't stop until I'm dead. So.
And one of the powerful things that I speak about on my podcast is the power of your tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're casting spells onto yourself when we don't treat ourselves kindly. Like, oh, I'm gonna die, or this is gonna happen, and then we're all so negative. And to a certain degree, it's okay because we're humans, right?
Right.
But like a lot of people are not conscious on how they treat themselves with their own words.
Exactly.
Right? And so we're literally like programming ourselves at a genetic level to feel that which you've spoken of, because your words have power. And a lot of people are into the Bible really tells you like there's the power of life and death is in the tongue, right? So
yes, it's so true, and that you do your programming. You speak your words out to the universe, and the universe has nothing to do but respond.
Right.
So if you're saying, "Hey, I'm tired, you're gonna get more tired.
You're manifesting that into your life.
So if you feel like you're low on energy and you're like, I'm good, I'm feeling good, and you say those words out, then you feel good and you'll get your energy back.
The action follows. Right.
And that's an easy one for people to see how fast that manifests.
Right.
Inside
so now imagine if you're doing that for like 20 years, right? So now you got 20 years that you reprogram your mindset. And your genetic makeup to be that which you're saying. So
I was saying that out loud. I'm not gonna quit till I'm dead, and so I was killing myself. And
literally.
Yeah, not consciously, intentionally, but it was taking my life from me to the point of it almost killed me. And I went into the hospital. I'm like, something's wrong. Like, I was actually working a shift in the NICU, and I just felt like my heart was going to stop, completely stop. And I opened up to one of my coworkers, because I'm still just trying to push through, and I was charging that day.
Trying to be tough.
And we were getting an admit, and I'm like, and my heart was about to stop. And I opened up and told one girl, I'm like, I'm going to die this week.
Oh, man.
And it was a long time coming, and I didn't tell anybody. It was an internal, and I had gone to doctors and everything, and trying to find the answers, and couldn't find the answers, and so I'm like, I'm just gonna die. And I resolved myself to that.
Right.
And that's hard to say, because all up until then, I'm like, I can't die. My kids have already lost a brother and a dad, and I was remarried, and my husband and his family were amazing, so I'm like, they'll be fine. I resonated that. I resolved that in my head. They'll be fine.
So you made up your mind that it was fine for you to go.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I can only imagine.
Yeah. So, but it was a long fought battle, and I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and pretty much they just said it was in my head, and there was nothing physically wrong with me that they could find, because they're only trained in what they're trained in. And, so I booked a last minute trip with my kids to Disneyland, which sounds crazy, but when you're dying, like, you're not thinking clearly.
Right.
And that's a studied thing you can look into. Like, when you're at the end of life, you kind of separate a little bit from what we consider reality. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to die this week, and I want my kids to have a good memory of me before I go, so I'm going to take them to Disneyland.
Wow, so surreal.
Yeah, and so that day, it was my last shift before Disneyland, and I knew in my head and heart that I was not coming back. But I wasn't telling anybody this. Not my kids, not my husband, not my coworker. Nobody knew this.
So you just kept it to yourself, like secretly?
Yeah, it was inside.
That was your plan?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a plan. I just knew that's what was going to happen. And I didn't want to die initially, but finally I just resolved myself to, I guess, there's no answers. Yeah, there's no answers. I'm physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually exhausted.
So there was nothing that the Western medicine could offer you to, quote unquote, fix you, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I opened up to my coworker and told her, and she's like, Cindy, if this is really how you're feeling, you need to go to the ER right now. And I said, no, they can't help me. I've already been to all the doctors. Cindy, you go to the ER right now. And so another coworker drove me to the ER. We had separate buildings at the time. Drove me to the ER, and my EKG strip would literally, my heart would shoot up to 190 beats a minute and
Wow, that's high.
shoot down to 36, 40, and it would do this thing over and over and over. And every time, like when my heart would shoot up, it was me fighting. It was my spirit fighting to stay
Right.
alive. And I'm like, I would scream out, help me, I'm dying. And that would be all the energy I had. And then I would lay back down on the gurney, and my heart would dip the other way. And then I would go down to where I knew I wasn't gonna have another breath. And then I would fight again. My spirit would come back, help me, I'm dying. And I went through this cycle in the ER, and the doctors come in and told me I was crazy. They were gonna try to blue sheet me to BMed.
Oh my gosh.
My coworker's sitting with me. She's watching my heart rate, and it's like, and they're telling me, you're making this up. You're doing, like this is in your head.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, so I'm acting crazy, which I knew. I mean, logically, I knew I was acting crazy because I'm like, I'm dying, help me.
You're going through these emotions,
Yeah.
this crazy moment, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I knew outwardly it looked crazy. I'm a nurse. I worked in all the I mean, I know, I understand, but I know what I was going through.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you can say all you want, but look at my ankles. My ankles were this big around, each of them, with level 4 pitting edema. I'm like, how am I making that up?
Right, that's a physical manifestation.
Yeah,
right.
I'm like, look at my monitor here.
Yeah.
How am I making my heart
That's
go down?
Not, yes.
Do those two extreme? I can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, I can.
Right.
Now I know, but at that point, it's like a physical thing according to Western medicine. There's no way physically in Western medicine that you know.
So what they
that I
treat
could
is
be in
the physical
control of that.
Right.
Yeah, but they couldn't find anything on any other lab work, right, or any tests they've done. And I had been to every specialist by that time. I had been pieced apart by everybody at that time.
How long would you say you were trying to go to Western medicine, like months?
Well, honestly, like years, because of depression that I was fighting, but I wouldn't allow myself to be depressed. So I would have low energy and migraines, and they diagnosed me with full body migraines and MS and lupus and all these crazy things, right? And I was like losing feeling in my legs and just years.
Were you on medications then? Like, were you taking any medications?
No.
Okay.
I refused medicines just because of what I watched my mother go through with Western medicine, and she would take a pill for everything, and every time she took one pill, then they'd give her 3 more for the side effects. And so, even being a nurse, I was like, yes, critical care is imperative, but I wouldn't take pills unless it was temporary and specific.
Right.
So, so in that ER that day, they were literally gonna whisk me off to BMed and admit me against my will because I'm crazy in their mind. And thankfully, working in the hospital long enough and having enough people that know me and trust me and know that something's wrong, I had a very close friend that was working or does work in the cath lab.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him and I said, can you please come down here? Like, my heart's gonna stop and they're trying to send me, or I didn't know at the time they were gonna send me to BMed, but I'm like, my heart is stopping and nobody's helping me.
Wow.
And he's like, Cindy, it's really busy, but I'll try and come down on a break. And so anyway, in the process, they're like,
you were desperately.
I was desperate.
You were desperately.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. Right?
And I was like, I'm dying, please help me. And they wouldn't help me, and so I'm like, fine, if you're not gonna help me, I'm gonna go home and die with my babies. I'm gonna go hug them before I die. I'm not gonna die here in this bed. And so I like tried taking off my monitors, and of course then that looks even more crazy, but they're like, oh, you're gonna kill yourself. That was their rationale now for sending me to BMed. BMed is like the psych ward, mental health unit for those that don't know, but I'm like, no, I'm not gonna kill myself. Why would I be here telling you I'm dying and help me if I was gonna kill myself?
Right.
Like,
You would have done it already.
yeah,
Right.
I want help. So my friend happens to walk in right as they're trying to wheel me away, and he's like, wait a minute, can I talk to her a minute? He's like, I know her, and they trust him because he comes down all the time to get heart patients and stuff,
Nice.
and they know him very well. And he says, can I talk to her a minute? I know her very well, and something's wrong. And that dear friend had been with me through all of it, through the loss of my son, through the loss of my husband, very close friends. So
right. It's important to have friends,
yeah.
right? I'm glad he was there, right?
Yeah. So he, knew that this was not right for me to be acting that way. So he talked to me, and he's like, and he immediately calls the cardiac doctor he's working with, and the doctor comes right down and does an eval on me, and he's actually asking me my physical symptoms, which is what they look for, and my lab work, and looking over my lab work, and seeing my edema, and hearing me talk about my heart, and he's like, Cindy, you're not crazy.
Nice.
And he said, there's two things that I've seen in my career that could be causing these symptoms. And one's very easy to diagnose. It's a little teeny tiny hole in your heart that you can go with your whole life. And if that's it, it's a simple fix and you'll be good to go. And the other one is adrenal related, but that's not his forte.
Right.
So he's like, and he didn't go into that one.
He was leaning more to the little tiny
hole.
the
tiny hole.
Yeah.
He's like, it's an easy diagnosis. We can find it and fix it. He's like, but, I'm really busy and I can't do it right away. And I'm like thinking, oh my gosh, because I was going to die in that moment. I'm like, I can't hold on any longer. That's what I was feeling. But he's like, we will get you in today. And so I'm like, all right, telling myself, I can hold on. I can hold on until 5 or whenever he was thinking. And I don't know what happened when he walked out of that room, but I have an idea of what happened. And he had some words with the ER doctor who was trying to send me to BMed, and the doctor walked back in and took me off with the gurney and wheeled me up and immediately did the test.
Right.
So I can only imagine what went on between them, but I'm just so grateful for that doctor believing in me.
Your friend, right?
My friend, and then this doctor that actually listened to me and looked at me as,
like a human being.
Yeah.
You're not crazy.
Yeah.
You got something, right?
Exactly. And so I was like, yes, this is it. It's a hole in my heart. They're going to fix it. They're going to do the scan, and I'm going to be amazing after. And they did the scan, and it wasn't a hole.
Whoa.
And then I'm like...
So then you kept, again, like, it brought you back to, like, okay, if it's not that, then what is it? Like, what's really going on?
Yeah. And so he said, Cindy, I'm sorry, it's not this, but the other thing is adrenals, and you need to go see an adrenal specialist with. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to live through that. In my head, I'm not telling him that. But I knew I wouldn't be able to hold on very much longer to where I was at. And I had this Disneyland trip planned, which was the next day.
Right.
It was the next day after that. So we go, head down to Disneyland. My family doesn't know. They know I'm sick. They know I've been going to the
Nobody
doctors.
knows that what you.
They don't know that I know I'm dying. Except in that ER when I shouted it out. But so we're driving down to Disneyland, and one of my dear, dear friends, she was a newborn ICU nurse and went on to get her nurse practitioner. And she had been with me over all the years, like helping me. Like we were testing my hormones. We were doing, everything possible.
All sorts of tests.
Yeah.
Right.
And she called me on my way down. I was about 2 hours away from home and 4 hours from Disneyland. And she's like, Cindy, where are you? And I said, well, I'm in Vegas. She's like, you need to come home right now. She's like, we figured out what it is. And I'm like, what? She's like, you're in cortisol insufficient, in a cortisol crisis. You need to come back to the ER right now. And I said, no, I'm not coming back. I said, they're not going to help me there. They think I'm crazy. I know I'm going to die.
You think they were planning to put you into
No.
No, Okay.
No, I trusted her.
Okay.
I 100% trusted her. But you know, your logical mind when you're at that stage right before death is not coherent enough. I mean, it was enough, but at that point, I'm like, I will not go back to that hospital where they treated me like that. And they're my coworkers. I worked there for 17 years. You know, I felt like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, Cindy, I didn't want to say this over the phone, but if we don't get cortisol in your system, you will die.
For those who don't understand what cortisol is, I want to give it a little.
Yes, so cortisol is a stress hormone that your body produces, and you have to have some level of cortisol at all times in your body. And anytime you go through any kind of a stressor, you get a boost of cortisol. And it could even be like a roller coaster stressor. It could be something fun and exciting, but
or like wearing a mask.
Yes, wearing a mask is a stressor for people, what good or bad. You know, if people are pro-mask, then they're worried about the people not wearing masks. People that are anti-mask are mad they have to wear one. That can stress. Also, it stresses your physiological system with the oxygen and carbon dioxide. But that's
carbon
a whole
dioxide,
other
right.
that's a whole other rabbit hole. So, but yeah, I had been under so much stress my whole life. Literally, and I mean, I didn't even go into childhood stuff, but my whole life I had been under stress. Mm-hmm. So I'm just constantly running on high cortisol the whole time, to where my kidneys are like depleting of being able to produce.
And being in a stressful mood is what causes diseases as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. Stress, and that one is well diagnosed. Like people know, like cortisol, too much stress and you get belly fat, right? So that's a physical representation of
too much stress within yourself.
Yeah, and that's like low on the list of what all it can
symptoms,
cause. But
right?
yeah, but that's one that I think most people
the most common one.
Resonate with. So she was like, Cindy, I don't want to scare you, but if we don't get cortisol in you, you're gonna die. And I'm like, I know I'm dying. I've been telling people I'm dying. Nobody's listening to me. I'm going to Disneyland with my kids, and I'm gonna die with my kids.
And that's what you told her.
Yeah, right? I said that on the phone, and she's like, Cindy, if you don't want to come back to this hospital, then pull over in Vegas and go to the hospital there. We'll call them. We'll give you all your lab work. You know, we finally figured it out. Like unbeknownst to me, she had gotten all her doctors together, like almost every week on my case for a long time because it was so critical. But the night before, they had all gotten together and stayed up till 11 o'clock at night, just going over everything. And then she went home and prayed. And at the time, I didn't believe in God. Mm-hmm. And it came to her. It came to them. Mm-hmm. And they found out, like, I had burned through all my cortisol and I was dying. And all the physical symptoms I was having was exactly textbook, but nobody's looking for it. Nobody looks for that. And ended up actually going into a cortisol crisis, which if you don't get cortisol within 24 hours, you're dead. You have to have cortisol in your system. I had 9 days documented, 0 cortisol.
No cortisol, and that's why your heart was spiking up and down?
Yes, it was my spirit keeping me alive, and I knew it, and I kept telling them that. I'm like, my body's dying. My spirit is the only thing keeping me here. And it's physically documented in lab work now, but they weren't seeing it and putting it all together at the time.
Right.
And so I just refused. I'm like, I'm not going to die in a hospital. I'm dying with my kids.
Right.
And she's like, please, she's begging me, and I didn't. And she's like, okay, Cindy, I'm going to call you in a prescription for steroids, which is the medication they give you to increase your cortisol.
Right.
Yeah. It's a chemical, the pharmaceutical equivalent, there we go, equivalent to cortisol. Mm-hmm. So she's like, I'm going to call, how long are you going to be there? I said 5 days. I'm going to call you in enough cortisol to get you through that 5 days and get home so we can treat you. Well, I had miscalculated the timeline because of driving, and I was like, well, we're in Disneyland 5 days and then driving, so the steroid worked.
Nice.
It gave me back energy. Right. It gave me back hope, because I had no hope. And but it only worked till about noon each day because it was a small dosage. Yeah, because you can really you can't
Of course.
overshoot it. Like, you
Yeah.
need to be in a hospital. Like,
Right.
you know, what I was doing was took my life in my own hands, literally, and I knew that. But so she only called in a small dose to make sure, you know, she didn't really set me off. I mean, imagine having no cortisol for 9 days and then
That's,
giving me a big
wow,
dose. That
right.
could kill me too.
Also, right.
So she was very intuitive and intelligent and divinely guided.
That's good.
But I had miscalculated how long we were going to be there and to get home. And so the last day, I had no more cortisol left to even get home to St. George. And ironic divine timing, while I was in Disneyland, a travel nurse that I had worked with and become very good friends was in the area while I was there, and she had seen a post I had put on social media and saw I was in Disneyland. She's like, Cindy, you're here? I have to come see you. And so she came to see me, and she could tell one look by looking at me that I was not well.
Okay.
And I'm like, literally, I had propped myself up, like, because at the end of the day, I had zero energy. But I told my husband, I'm like, I don't want her to see me sick. I don't want her to know I'm sick. So you know, set me up, prop me up, leave me here, and then come get me after she leaves, because we were just going to sit and chat for a couple hours, you know.
Right.
And, but she knew immediately something was wrong. And she was like, what, you know, she got me to open up, and I told her, and she's like, I'm booking we were meeting in my hotel room. She's like, I'm not leaving your side. She's like, I'm booking a room here tonight, even though she lived, you know, just 20 minutes away. She's like, I'm staying here with you. And you have the answers now. Because I'm like, I'm dying. I'm not going to make it through the night. And she it's like, no, Cindy, you can fight through this. You've gotten this far. They have the answers now. They know what's wrong with you.
Right.
You need to get home to get help. And I'm going to stay here with you and make sure you get home. And so I'm like, all right, I can, you know. And I'd been fighting for my life for a long time now. And I'm like, all right, one more step. You know, like, you're climbing that mountain, and it's like you want to give up. You want to give up, but you're like, okay, it's only one more step. Okay, I can do one more. You know, and so she gave me that oomph to do one more step.
Right.
But in the morning, she's like, okay, I'm going to meet you downstairs in the morning. And usually in the morning, I had a tiny bit of energy, because cortisol, you have your most amount of cortisol first thing in the morning, and then you utilize it throughout the day.
Right.
You have a little small burst about halfway through the day, but your most amount is in the morning. So in the past, and then with the steroid, like, the morning is when I had a little energy. So she's like, all right, meet me downstairs in the morning at this time, and I didn't meet her because I couldn't get out of bed.
Right. Were you taking steroids at that time?
No, I was out.
You were out, right?
Yeah, I was out. And so she came to my room, and I sent my kids downstairs and tried to send my husband out, because I didn't want them to know I was dying, but I knew I wasn't getting out of bed.
Your husband didn't know either?
He knew, but he also was listening to the Western medicine doctors saying there was nothing wrong with me, and it was in my head.
Right.
So he was kind of like, I don't know, is this real? Is she making this up? You know,
Because
kind of
I'm assuming that he would look at you and be like, you know, is she fine, or?
Yeah, because she looks fine.
Front, right?
Yeah, I was good at putting up a front.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
But so yeah, but in that moment, like, he knew, and so he wouldn't leave the room.
I'm pretty sure.
And so my friend comes in, and she was like, Cindy, but at that moment he was like angry, because fear, you turn it to anger to get through it. A lot of people do. I mean, that's like what we do, what we're programmed to do.
Natural.
And instead of like feeling fear and honoring that and being like, what can we do? Or, you know, it's like, no, this isn't happening. Like, my wife's not dying.
Right?
Yeah. So he turned it to anger and was like, you're fine, get out of bed, you know. And I'm like, I physically can't. Like, I couldn't even lift. I tried to lift my phone up to answer my friend's call, and my hand falls to the bed. Like, I had zero.
It was bad.
Yeah. And so she's like, Cindy, we have to get you home so they can treat you. And I'm like, I can't make it home. I can't get out of this bed. I'm dying in this bed. And so luckily, she's like, let's go get some hydrocortisone cream. It's 1% steroid. Cream you rub on for rashes or I can't think of anything else right now because my brain's so focused. but it's a cream you buy over the counter, and it has 1% steroid. Very low dose.
Where can you buy these, like Walgreens?
Yeah, anywhere. Walgreens, Walmart. Just hydrocortisone
okay.
cream. Use it for itching. You use it for rashes. You use it for things like that.
Right.
But she's like, she sent my husband to the store to get 1 tube of that. She's like, it's 1% steroid. That'll give you enough steroid to get into the car. And she's like, you get home. And so I did, and it did. It got me to the car. And then I would rub it on my body on the drive home when I was feeling like I wasn't going to take another breath. When I was about done again, I would put a little more on. And I got home, we went straight to the ER. And the ER doctors were not in communication with all the doctors that had figured out what was wrong.
Right.
But my doctor was calling them saying, she's coming, like, prepare for her, this is what's happening. Well, that exact person was a nurse practitioner. And so they kind of have an ego thing, especially ER doctors. And they already had their mind set up when they looked at my case that I'm crazy. And so they totally ignored her. And I sat in the ER waiting room, laid out on the chairs because I couldn't sit up. And she calls me and she's like, Cindy, I'm doing everything I can to get them to get you a bed and get you treatment, but they're not listening to me. She's like, get into the ER. I said, I am in the ER. There's nobody else in the ER. It was just me, and they weren't taking me in. And they literally like roll their eyes when they see me because it was the third time I had been in a week.
Right.
So,
Wow.
so she finally does get somebody on the phone and to take me in, and saying they all had their mind read up. It was written in my chart, it's.
She's crazy.
Yeah, and this doctor comes in, and he actually is a doctor that helped me. I mean, I have had a lot of health issues that I haven't gone into, but after my 2-year-old, my son was born, my first son, I actually was in the ER with heart failure conditions, and they figured that out and treated it. But anyway, he had been my personal doctor for many years. He was an internist.
Right.
But I hadn't been to him in a number of years, probably 4 years or so. And so he didn't recognize me because I didn't even look like the same person. I was a waif of a person. I had lost so much weight. I was a skeleton.
Oh my God, right.
And my name had changed since I went to him as a doctor.
So he basically didn't recognize you?
He didn't know who I was, didn't recognize me.
It was that bad?
Yeah.
You were that, right?
Yeah. And so he walks in and looks at his clipboard and he's like, you're not in cortisol insufficient. You're not in cortisol failure. And I'm like, really? And he's like, nope. And I said, I ration out you have to have a certain level of cortisol. And the other one is escaping me right now. It's three initials, ATC. It's not ATC. And I'm so sorry because I'm so in my story and so far away from that. But there's 2 hormones that stay in balance, and they keep each other in balance. And when one's high, the other's low, and when one's low, the other's high. Well, I had 0 of each of them. Both of them were 0.
Gone.
And so as he's telling me I'm not in this cortisol insufficiency, and I'm like walking him through the literature of it and the facts of it, and he's like looking at what he was told prepped coming in from the ER docs
versus the
facts, and me walking him through the facts. I'm like, then you tell me what's wrong.
Right.
You tell me what's wrong. How can I have 0 of both of these and still be alive? And that's what he said to me. He's like, you wouldn't be alive if you really had 0. So these tests must be wrong.
Wow.
And I said, really? Because they were done here in this ER. Are you telling me that your hospital here messed up their tests? He's stumbling over his words. I don't know, but I wasn't here and I didn't run them, so I can't say.
So if he wasn't there, why is he saying such and such, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So eventually, I rationed with him enough for him to question what he was told, what he was seeing, and
versus
what I'm saying,
facts, right.
and the facts. And so he's like, well, I'm going to have to do my own tests, and in order to do this test accurately, you can't do it until the morning. You have to take your cortisol level first thing in the morning, before you even wake up, essentially, because even waking up and getting up out of bed and moving around induces a cortisol spike.
You're losing, right?
Yeah. Well, this was nighttime by then, and mind you, I'm just one breath at a time, literally just one breath at a time to stay alive. And my husband by then knew, like, and my best friend, who happened to be the wife of the nurse that came down
to help you out.
Yeah, they were there, and they were yelling at the doctor,
Supportive,
like,
right.
you help her, like, something's wrong, you
Wow.
need to help her. And he's like, well, I have to do my own test to prove it. And they were freaking out at that point. And I said, you guys, it's okay. I've gotten this far. I can make it till the morning.
Right, right.
And so they sent me over to be admitted and do the test in the morning. And nobody showed up to do the test. And I'm like, what? You know, like, I'm just literally a breath at a time. So I'm just waiting for this morning test to show them I have no cortisol. So they'll give me cortisol. And I knew by then it worked because the doctor had called me in some, you know.
Right.
And so they weren't showing up, and I had to call 3 times to get them to. They never even had the order written. The doctor never wrote the order.
Right.
And so it was just crazy, and I had to go over 2 shifts, the night shift and the day shift. The night shift wouldn't listen to me because they had heard all this stuff from the ER.
Right.
And the day shift came in, and she was a float nurse, so she's not in the loop of getting all the gossip.
What's going on,
yeah,
right?
She's just like, you're a patient, and I see you're critical, and why are you here? Oh, you're here for this testing. Well, why isn't it ordered? Let me get the doctor to order it. Oh, the doctor's not answering. Let me find another doctor that will order it. This went on. It was crazy.
Wow, this is almost like to me it sounds like a spiritual battle.
Oh yeah,
like literally a spiritual battle for your life.
It
like someone was trying to take you out.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Ooh, you gave me chills right now. That. Yeah.
Someone was trying to take you out.
Yeah. So, this godsend of a nurse actually listened to me and looked at me as a patient, and she said that. She's like, I believe you. I said, nobody believes me, but I'm dying. And she says, I believe you, and I'm going to help you. And so she just kept doing what she needed to do till she got somebody to take the test. And I could go down that rabbit hole longer because that was a whole nother process still to get the answers, and then to get somebody to read them, and then to get the cortisol sent to my room. Like, right. It was, I had to fight every freaking step.
That's what I'm saying. Someone was trying to take out your life. They were trying to take you out of this planet because of a greater purpose.
Absolutely.
That I'm sure you're going to talk about later.
Yes, for sure. So all said and done, they gave me the cortisol. The doctor comes in, and not the ones that treated me like I was crazy, but a doctor came in and apologized to me.
Better.
Which was all my soul needed in that moment.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm sorry we overlooked this. I'm sorry we missed this. And I said, okay, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, at least now I'm getting what I need.
Right.
You know. So, you know, they gave me the cortisol. Of course it worked. They said, okay, great. Take cortisol 3 times a day. Go on your way. You're going to be fine. It'll be great. Even the doctor that found it, the one that called me on my way to Disneyland, she's like, Cindy, I have a patient that's, you know, she's 78 years old. And
Same situation as you, right?
She's been on cortisol. She's great. Like, you're going to be great now. I'm like, yes, this is the answer. I'm going to be great, you know. And it did. It felt great as the cortisol comes in. But then as it would drop and spike, my body was having this visceral reaction.
Right.
Like, too much was too much and too little was too little. And I was, like, dying versus, like, wanting to just, like,
what about those 2 hormones that you were missing? Like, did that get balanced or no?
Well, that was the steroid they were giving me was trying to
balance it out.
Yeah, that's the what we know as a Western medicine to treat it with. Mm-hmm. So going through all that, like, it wasn't like I wasn't at a balanced level. I was spiking and dropping and spiking and dropping, and I'm like, and not knowing at the time, but looking back, but when I would drop is when I would feel like dying again. And then if I would take the cortisol, I'd be fine, or the steroid, I'd be fine. But then I would like drastically spike me, and so I ended up back in the ER for the 4th time in about 2 weeks.
Wow.
And by then they were just like, we already found what's wrong with you. What are you doing here? You know, like, again,
Wow.
treating me like, even though they like almost, I almost
Dismiss the
died
whole
by their
thing.
hands,
Yeah.
they're still treating me like I'm crazy and I don't know what I'm talking about within my own body.
It's all you had.
Yeah, yeah. And I said, so I told him I felt like a brittle diabetic, that crashes with their sugar. If it's too high, then you have this reaction. If it's too low, then you're comatose. And that's how I was with cortisol.
Oh.
And
Right.
yeah, and they're just like, well, that's not right. This is what the textbook says, and this is what you should be how you should be receiving this medicine, and how you should be, So whatever you're saying your body's going through is not right because that's not what my textbook is telling me. I'm like, I feel like I need a steady stream, like a diabetic that has an insulin pump, and that's what I wanted. I'm like, isn't that out there? That has to be out there. And they're like, no, it doesn't exist. Well, guess what? It exists now, but
Right.
8 years ago it didn't. And now they know way more than they did then. But that's where we were at that time. And so, knowing, like, I was crashing, and I'm like, this one doctor that called me, um, well, nurse practitioner, but she said, Cindy, I'll help you. She's like, we'll compound the steroid. We'll send it to a compounding pharmacy. We'll compound it so it's extended release. And so you're not getting this spike and drop.
Yeah,
you're getting
yeah.
an extended release of it. And that was a godsend.
Constantly. Right.
It was amazing. It was a miracle. I'm like, this is it. Perfect.
Did that last all the way to the end?
Yeah.
I mean, all the way to the night when you went to bed and all that?
Yeah, it worked wonders.
Nice.
Having said that, eventually it would still get to be not the extremes of like death and like outrage, but it was still just, I was just feeling not balanced, and that feeling didn't feel good either. And so I started going to naturopath doctors, and they were like, we can fix your adrenals. Like, you don't have to be, we can add these supplements that'll help strengthen your adrenals. And I'm like, great, let's do that. Let's strengthen my adrenals.
So is this where you sacred medicine path begins, or?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. So they started me just looking into more holistic stuff, which I was never thinking would work ever. And I thought people that went to naturopaths and holistic
They were
people
dumb, or they
were
were
crazy.
They were crazy.
And
they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I did believe in chiropractors because I had a whole different experience with them. But anything on the alternative side of medicine, for the most part, like, I was like, oh, they're cuckoo.
It was very taboo.
Yeah.
Because you're a doc, you're a nurse.
Yeah.
You went to school for it.
Exactly.
You know the textbooks, right?
Exactly. So when they're starting to say, hey, you can take this herb, you can take that, these plants, these vitamins to heal you, I'm like, but by then I was open to it because I knew that the body as a whole was meant to run synergistically, and there was something missing. And so I started down that path, and it did. It helped me. I was able to start weaning off my steroids. And my endocrinologist, however, was like, you cannot wean off your steroids. You're going to kill yourself. You have to be on these steroids. And so I just quit telling him that I was weaning them. And I was being guided with my nurse practitioner as well as my naturopath, and we were working together to
Nice.
slowly taper. And so by the next time I went to the endocrinologist, I told him again, I said, well, I'm weaning off my steroid. He's like, you're going to kill yourself. You can't do that. I said, well, actually, I've been off of them for 3 months now, and I'm still alive.
Wow.
And he was like, what? That's impossible.
Wow.
And he's like, well, we must have misdiagnosed you. So he starts looking through his lab work and his literature, and I said, well, you diagnosed me, so if I was misdiagnosed, then
it was you.
It was you.
Yeah,
and so he was like, yeah, he's literally looking at his books with his eyes this big, and he's like, we need to study you. We need to put you in a box and study you. That was his exact words to me.
Like a rat lab.
Yeah.
Right?
And I'm like, nope, I am done. Like, I made up my mind leaving that endocrinologist that day that I was never walking back into Western medicine. And I had a whole shift, and just had to disconnect from who I was as a person, because I'm Western medicine. I believe in doctors. I believe in all of that. And at that moment, I was done. I'm like, no, they're not out there to heal people. They're out there to give people a label, a diagnosis and a pill.
And treat the symptoms.
And treat the symptoms,
right.
and that's it.
And separate, the
and
biology.
Separate you, yeah, and piece you apart as an individual, and not look at you as a whole person. And at that time, that was my complete belief, and I've now come around to realize that they only know what they've been taught, and so I honor that. They were taught in med school, like, hey, if you are cortisol insufficient, you have to be on steroids the rest of your life. They're taught that, so they believe that. And I understand now because I was the same way with vaccines, right? I fully believed in vaccines until I had an experience where it's undeniable that vaccines were harming my children.
Yeah, causing autism,
yes.
And all that. Right?
Yes. And so.
And it's very documented too.
Yeah. And so going through my own health stuff and coming into the natural medicine stuff, but to me, natural medicine was at that time just vitamins and fruit from the earth and roots like
herbs,
licorice root,
right.
herbs, that kind
right.
of stuff. You could walk into a natural food store and do that. And so I definitely tuned way into that and healed myself, helped a lot of family and friends and people that were healing because I was just so in tune to it and researching it for myself. When people would call me and they're like, I'm dealing with this, I'm like, oh, I know, you can take da-da-da and that'll help you. And so I was just doing that just because that's who I am, not as any kind of a practice or anything. But one day my sister told me, I don't know, she's fine. I'm like, I don't know what she wants me to say, but I'll just say it, sister. I have two, so it could be either.
All right.
But my sister told me about psilocybin.
Right.
So.
Psilocybin.
Psilocybin. Magic mushroom. No.
Right.
They are magic, but I don't like necessarily going with that. But psilocybin. And how she had done.
For those who are wondering, like before we go into we're in a beautiful metaphysical store. It's just amazing. Like you walk in and it's just a magical place. And bro, yo, hello. This is the store. And you don't want to bring your wallet in here because you'll be spending hundreds of dollars on cool stuff, right?
It's a beautiful store. I'm leaving here with a few items myself,
right.
And I've been into a lot of these stores.
I bought some stuff too.
Like this crystal ball, I think I'm gifting to a girlfriend of mine. She's been looking for a red crystal ball.
Right. Cool. So right. So now you're in this process of natural medicine, right?
Yes. So I'm already down the plants and herbs, and I know how healing they are.
Yeah.
And my sister brings up psilocybin, and my Western med mind is like, oh no, illegal, that's bad for you. All these
well,
things.
and it's basically like a war on psychedelic plants because you have the Reagan administration way back in the day label mushrooms as a Schedule I drug, right? So, but way back in the day, there was a lot of research being done as far as how psychedelics are so powerful in treating mental illnesses and rewiring the brain and creating neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, all those things. Beautiful, amazing, powerful plants. But for some strange reason, it's a drug.
Yeah.
It's become demonized, right?
They say there's no medical benefit, which there's
right.
so many benefits.
Even though now research now that's being done now in modern days, right now in 2022, there's research that is coming to the surface once again to shed light on the medicinal properties of these psychedelic plants.
Yes, and thankful for that, for sure, that it's now coming to light. And at the time my sister brought psilocybin up to me, I was immediately no. And but then I started researching after she told me about it, and they had started these studies up again. I mean, they had the studies back then, they shut them down, but they had restarted the studies.
Right.
And the FDA was studying it, and to me, if FDA says there's benefits and they're studying it for the benefits, then maybe I will look into it.
So if the FDA approves it, then it's fine, right? Especially coming from the medical field,
Right.
right? It's like, oh, if the FDA approves it, then yeah, it's good to go.
Yeah. So that's where my mind, once when she was talking about it, but I started researching it and I saw the FDA was studying it and showing it was beneficial for PTSD, which I was obviously suffering with, depression, anxiety, addiction, like all these positive benefits. And it said that, it was coming to where they were going to approve it for use.
Right.
And so that allowed my brain to be okay with trying it. So she and I had a beautiful journey. She held the space for me to try the mushroom, and we were in beautiful southern Utah, Zion, by the river.
Before we go into that, disclosure, we're not advocating for anybody to take any sort of drugs at all. Any illegal activities, that's not what we're here to do. We're just bringing information from a personal perspective out into the public.
Yes.
So I just want to make a disclosure comment on that.
Yes, thank you for doing that. And psilocybin is actually legal in some states, but not all at this point.
Right.
One day that'll come. But
hopefully.
But yes, absolutely follow laws and everything else. But
Right.
just sharing my own journey and experience.
Exactly.
So she held the space for me to try psilocybin, and it took me to a place I had no idea was inside of me. And it was 8 years after my son had passed, 4 years after my husband. And I thought I had healed from losing them.
Yeah.
Because I just forced through, and buried it so far down. I never thought about it, so I thought I was healed. And just kept going and pretending everything was okay.
Mm-hmm.
But what psilocybin did was show me and take me there to that dark place inside of myself. Right. And showed me my son, and it was hard to see him, and it just showed me more and more and more. And I mean, at first I smiled. I'm like, my son, yeah, I know he's in a good place. I knew that. Mm-hmm. And I felt him. He actually came to me 3 nights after he passed and let me nurse him and hold him, and said he would continue coming to me until I was okay to let him go. Mm-hmm. And so by the 3rd night, I said, I miss you, I love you, but you need to go, and I'm okay. Wow. So, sorry, that was a side note. That's how I realized.
Sorry about your feelings, yeah. Right?
When I said I didn't know there was a God, like after that, like I knew there was something more, whether it's a God or something bigger, source. Right. But after that experience, for sure, I knew. With this psilocybin, when they first show me my son, I'm like happy. I'm like, oh, my son, Mm-hmm. And then it's like, sit with this, and I went dark.
This is within your mushroom ceremony,
yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. And I went into this dark hole in this pit of despair.
Wow. Just let it out. It's fine.
Yeah.
We can always cut that if you want, if you don't feel comfortable.
Yeah. So I went into this dark hole with it, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I miss him. I'm sad. Why did he have to get taken from me? And it was like, now pick your head up. Mm-hmm. And so I did. I picked my head up, and it's like, open your eyes. And I opened my eyes, and I'm on this beautiful river, and there's these 3 little children playing in the river, just having so much fun, and it was so beautiful. Mm. And
this is just still your mushroom ceremony, right?
Yeah, still in the mushroom ceremony.
Powerful.
Yeah. And I just see the beauty in the world. And then I start laughing. Those little kids are having a good time in the river, and I'm just tuning into them, and I just start laughing.
Wow.
And the tears turn to tears of laughter and joy and gratitude. And then it showed me my son again, and I went down dark, deep. And I started sobbing and just tears of that sorrow. And sobs of sorrow because it took me back down into the darkness.
Yeah.
And I stayed in there a while, and it's like, now pick your head up. So then I came out again, and I open my eyes, and I see the beauty, and I start laughing again, and tears of laughter, and then it shows me again, takes me down the dark. And I sit with that, and I'm sobbing. And it cycled it over and over, and at first it was like slow, until it started going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And I'm literally like putting my head down and sobbing, picking my head up and laughing, to the point where it was all one. It was all one, and
the laughter and the sobbing.
The laughter and the sorrow and the joy.
The sorrow.
And all the tears were all of it at once. And it said, you can't know true joy without feeling true sorrow.
Wow.
And what a blessing, having my son in my life. And I would never give that back, even though it was taken early. I would never not want that experience with him, because it showed me that. And so that was my first experience with any kind of a plant medicine. And it was quite a while before I experienced it anymore.
But that experience, to me, it sounds that it brought hope into your life.
Yeah.
It shifted the energy that you were experiencing, because all the things that you went through in the past, and the things that we're going through in your health, in your body, in your mind. So is that what happened?
Yeah. Well, and thank you for bringing that up, because further on my journey now, I can see, but I was not experiencing joy in my life at all, because I was suppressing that sorrow and anger.
Yeah.
I was not able to feel the other side of that.
Right?
Yeah.
You feel like you had to.
Yeah, I felt like I had to suppress that. I would outwardly do fun things with my kids and say, oh, yeah, I'm the fun mom.
On the surface.
What's that?
On the surface.
Yeah, so on the surface level, I was having fun. And, this is fun. Let's, do this thing. And, but I wasn't feeling that way. I wasn't feeling happy. I wasn't feeling joy. And, because I had suppressed the sorrow and the anger and the pain. And so if you suppress an emotion, you can't feel the opposite of that emotion, no matter what you think.
Right.
You can project out all day long, and I did. And you look at my social media back then, and I was like on top of the world, living a great life, and best mom, and had moved on from everything, but really I hadn't.
And I'm sure like your story right here can resonate with a lot of people out there on Facebook, on whatever. Because social media, I think, is a little deceptive, because you can portray yourself to be something that you're not.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And so like we can come across stories, posts on Facebook, and then a lot of people really never know what that person's going through.
Absolutely, never.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's powerful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what got me down into alternative type medicines and an alternative path. But I had to go so far from the Western medicine. Like, I was so angry, and I felt like they were all out there to harm people, I went to that extreme.
Right. Which in reality, now when we talk about the Western medicine, I'm not against the whole system when it comes, because there's great things that they do. So let's not we're not trying to demonize the whole system is evil and is bad, but certain practices are and there's certain practices within Western medicine that is beneficial to humans, the community, people that are sick, surgery.
Absolutely. Trauma, life and death situations. There's a place for all of it. But I was at a place when I sat with psilocybin that I was angry at Western medicine. And I was Western medicine, so that was hard. But I was at that place where I was so angry and felt they were out to harm people, which I don't believe that way anymore at all. Right? I know in everybody's hearts they're out there to heal people and help people, but
what they know.
Yeah, it's what you know, it's what you're taught, it's what you believe, it's what you see experience every day. You see druggie come in the ER a million times a day, and this person comes in that's in a true crisis, and you can't really separate, differentiate. Like, is this one real this time, or is this one crazy like all the rest?
Mhm.
So I know that now, but that's not where I was then.
Right.
And I'm very grateful for Western medicine for everything.
And like you say, doctors and nurses, they mean well because
Yes.
they went to school for, they prepare themselves intellectually to understand the biology.
Yeah.
But there's certain things that uh, it's almost like a limited knowledge that you're taught in the school system.
Yes.
When you're a nurse, when you're a doctor,
Right.
because and earlier, like in the very beginning, you were talking about how like within Western medicine they're trying to separate the body, the biology. Well, your liver is this is what's wrong with your liver, but they can't look at the broad aspects of what could be causing that, like the connection
Right.
between the systems, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So medicine is beautiful. Modern medicine is beautiful, but it's not perfect.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
that's the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I still was continuing to get my health back because going through cortisol crisis, and I had other autoimmune diseases I was diagnosed with, but obviously I was in a good place by now, at least in a place where I could continue working on that. And so just being more open to that, and realizing what a benefit that was at one sitting with psilocybin, and seeing the research on it, seeing that it's great for all of these things.
Right.
They say one sitting of psilocybin is like 10 years
10
of
years.
talk therapy.
Yes.
And I was going to talk therapy too. I was doing all the things,
Right.
So, and I felt that, and I loved my therapist at the time. And I told her, I said, whoa. And she was very religious minded too. But I was very open with her. I said, Lynn, I'm telling you, this one sitting with this psilocybin was like 3 years of working with you, and I love you, and I love everything you've helped me with. But one sitting, I got to this place. Like, this is amazing.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the demonization, they demonize these plants
Right.
as if they're evil.
Right.
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 They call them drugs when they're
Right.
not drugs.
No, they're not drugs.
Right.
They were put on this earth for our benefit. And to me, like, if you think about it logically, especially anybody that's any kind of faith based or anything out there, Mother Nature based or anything, everything on this earth is here intentionally. There's no accidents, right? But God puts things on this earth for us, for our benefit. And yes, there's things, checks and balances and everything.
Right.
But it's silly to me that people are like, oh, a mushroom is a drug, versus something that's been concocted and made in a lab with chemicals and scientists and who knows what, petroleum, who knows what all's in there. We don't
know. And I think I talked about this a little, mention real quick about the word pharmacy, going back to the Greek word, which means like putting yourself in a trance, like almost like witchcraft type of deal. Right. Now, I'm not demonizing witchcraft either, because there's a place for everything.
Right.
So.
Yeah, everything has checks and balances. And there's pharmaceuticals that saved my life, so I'm not like naysaying that at all. That's great. It has its place for life-saving instances.
Yeah.
For long-term healing, that's where we're kind of lacking in modern society right now, understanding that. And so just going more and more down the plant medicine path, which took me quite a few years to delve deeper into it.
And do the shifting.
Yeah, and do the shifting. But each time was so profound for me, and I had such a deeper healing, and each one was related. Most of them were all related back to a trauma I had suffered throughout my life, whether it was the death of my husband, whether it was being put in foster care as a child, whether it was abuse that I had suffered and endured, whatever that was. Like, each time I sat with it, I went and sat with the trauma and released it. Mm-hmm. I like honored it. I acknowledged it. I realized it was there for my own healing. Like I say, the truth. You don't know true love without true loss. You don't know true sorrow or true joy without true sorrow. It's all a checks and balances. So, yeah, each time I had sat with medicine, it took me to a trauma place in the beginning, for sure, till I could heal myself. And every time I did that, my health improved more and more and more. And everyone's like, "What are you doing, Cindy?" And I wouldn't tell anybody because people are skeptical, right, or judgmental or whatever. And certain people I would tell.
You're a druggie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, you're glowing, you're radiating, you look like a different person. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. I'm working hard on myself. But it was literally the plant medicine.
Plant medicine.
Yeah.
Right. Sacred medicine. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we can go down those all day, but the reason why we're here in these dots right here, this all relates back to the very first beginning where I talked about the frogs and my son. Kambo is a beautiful frog medicine, and that was also brought into my life by that same sister, Silsite. And
it's always that one person,
right?
That initiated, right?
Yeah, that gateway. Very thankful for her. So I sat with Kambo, and was like, light that spark, find that fire within.
Yeah.
So
and I know, and the reason why I wanted to do these with you is because I know that you were called to bring this out.
Yeah.
So maybe like this interview, because I have nurses on my Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I wanna tag them on it, and I just put them out there and just let them watch, and whatever is gonna resonate with them is gonna resonate with them. So that's why we're doing this. So so Kambo.
I appreciate that. Perfect. Sitting with Kambo, what we're here for today, my first sitting was profound for me, and it's quite the different experience from a psychedelic. Kambo's not a psychedelic, but I went not immediately, a couple weeks after sitting with Kambo, and I went to Hawaii on a retreat because I just needed to feel like refreshed. Went with some girlfriends. We hiked waterfalls. We did amazing.
It's beautiful.
Had a beautiful, yes. And it was my first time, and I was 40, and I'm like, let's do this. So, we're in Hawaii.
40 is the new 30, right?
Right. So we're in Hawaii, and we're walking in the dark, hiking out of this beach. And I have the only light because everybody else's phones are dead. So I'm like holding the light to get up, and if there was something in the path, I would show them, and we'd get around it. Well, there was a stone in the path, and I went to step over it, and it moved, and I'm like, I had to like hurry and not step on it, and it was a frog, and I'm like, oh, little froggy, I almost stepped on you, and so I held the light on the frog and had all the girls get around safely, and as soon as we had all passed, I turned to leave, and the frog jumped right under my foot, and I stepped on it.
Did you kill it? Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest.
Right.
But I feel like I stepped on it enough that it would have done that kind of damage. It was a large frog, and when I turned to look, I couldn't see it, but I was also hysterical.
I'm pretty sure it survived.
Yeah, I want to believe so.
Yeah.
But what I went through was traumatizing because I'm like, Froggy, I tried to save you. Why wouldn't you let me save you? And I'm like crying, and one of the girls is like, Cindy, there's a message here for you. And she said, don't you relate frogs to your son? That little froggy Binky.
Right.
I didn't say this in the beginning, but when I designed his headstone, we put a frog on his headstone. That's how close they are to me.
Connected, right?
How connected. And so I'm like, yes, you're right. I couldn't save him either. And I just lost it. And she's like, no, Cindy, there's a deeper message here for you. Like, sit with it. And then I started thinking even more. I'm like, oh my goodness, I stepped on that frog with the leg that I had Kambo on, the frog medicine.
Wow.
I stepped on the frog, and I relate frogs to my son. And so I feel deeply connected to the frog and the frog medicine and what it's done for me and my path and my journey. And I know how healing it is for myself and also for anybody that chooses to experience it. And it's a completely different way than I'm not even gonna get into all the pathways and peptides and amazing medicines this is, but it's truly a medicine. In the Amazon, they use it as such. They use it as their vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
When I heard that, I was like, what? Like, they use this frog as vaccines, and I lost my son to frogs? Like, there's all these undeniable parallels for me as to why,
Right.
yeah, as to why I'm
Synchronicities,
so connected to this frog. And, you know, my path and why that spiritual whatever was trying to take me out, because it knows my path and where I'm going with this.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's kind of, I guess. I don't know if there's something else you'd like me to go into, but that's just my path into Western medicine to plant medicine, then back into balance, because I absolutely, you know, honor and cherish everything both sides have to offer, but
Right.
to come to a balance of the two and realize, like, these things that have been demonized or stigmatized or whatever are not bad. They're actually very good for us.
And a lot of people tend to judge things that they don't understand.
Yes.
Like if you haven't tried it, if you haven't researched, uh, then maybe not judge it, but maybe go into research and learn, right? Because knowledge is power,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So so what will be the what would you like to say to your own community? Because you come from a background nurse, right? You dive into this whole medical field, the very technicalities of it, right? And so switching from, you know, you being a nurse and going by the books and going by the facts and all this other stuff, and all of a sudden you go into this psychedelic experience with mushrooms, right? Psilocybin, and then that completely shifts your energy. It shifted your energy to the point where you begin to like walk with hope.
Yes.
And you begin to understand the dark aspects of yourself and the things that you went through, and that how uh, the psychedelic plants led you to neurogenesis,
yes,
neuroplasticity, expanding your neurons and creating new pathways within your neurological system. And then from there, you know, moving into combo, this other medicine that comes from the Amazon. What would be the message? What would you like to say to your community?
I would like to say be open. Be open to not knowing everything, which I certainly thought I did at one time. Be open to the possibility that there are other alternatives out there that can bring healing in a different way that we haven't looked at deeply. Do the research. Look into it. Look at the amount of side effects and deaths, which are very minimal to none.
Right.
Well, astronomical on one side, like
Right.
almost every pharmaceutical medication you can have or surgery, they warn you of the risk of death,
Right.
because it's very real. Versus the side effects and benefits and risks of death with these alternative ways.
Medicine, right?
Yeah, and if they're used in the right manner, and you have the right container and the right space and the right facilitator, the right people around you to make sure you're okay and nurtured and cared for, the risks are 0 to none.
0 to none.
0 to none.
Nobody, as far as the research goes, nobody has ever died of any psilocybin eating mushrooms or smoking weed and all that.
Exactly. No deaths on psilocybin, no deaths on ayahuasca. Very few, like 5 maybe possibly with combo, but that was only with some high risks that should have
could have been prevented.
Could have been prevented in the right care, in the right setting, and the right person at, you know, going over your health history with you and making sure, you know, this is the right thing for you. But 5 out of, like, think of all the pharmaceuticals and surgeries
and the people that have died because of them.
Right. Exactly. Like, where am I going to place my bets? I'm going to wager my bets on plants.
Natural medicine.
Yes, absolutely. Plants and jungle medicine and natural things on this earth that have had thousands of years of research versus hundreds, or versus 3 months for certain things that have been out there in the world in
Right.
recent years. Thousands of years of research that the natives have sat with and utilized their
And
entire lives.
right, and I think this is one of the reasons why how you have the ancient shamans that were killed off way back in the day,
Yes.
and how that medicine was suppressed because the religious system that came on the side of the world, they saw these shamans, these curanderos, these healers as like, oh well, they don't fit into the mold of the religious system.
Right.
So I'm not against religion. I'm against uh, the demonizing of these healing plants.
Right.
They're part of Mother Nature. They're here for a reason, right?
Right.
They're here to help us out. They're here to help humanity evolve, uh, balance, ourselves at an emotional level, psychological level. And you briefly kind of like went into that when you had your first mushroom ceremony, and that shifted the energy. And so the world is in a place where the collective energy is shifting, and the knowledge of these medicines are coming back.
Yes.
That's why there's a revolution. There's just we are beginning to see that revolution of these medicines being introduced here in the Western world.
Yes. Thankfully.
Right. So we're just glad that this medicine is available for people to look at, research, find out for yourself, gain knowledge. Kambo, is one of the many medicines out there. You have peyote, you have ayahuasca, one of the most powerful medicine plants out there. They call it the mother of all plants, ayahuasca. So a lot of people that watch my podcast, you guys always hear me talk about ayahuasca. So I haven't done ayahuasca myself, but eventually I will get to it. But any last words that you would like to say before we end this powerful, beautiful interview?
Um, you know, again, I just want to say be open. Be open to possibilities. Be open to something new. Because it may be beautiful. And I think that's the message I like to get out there.
Thank you. You want to say your name?
Yeah, my name is Cindy Jacobson, and my website is Finding the Fire, and I help people ignite that spark and find that fire within. And yeah, I just wish everybody well on their journey in life,
Your spiritual journey.
in their spiritual journey, and their physical journey too. We're going through a tough time right now, you know, and
especially with what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
People are freaking out. And
yeah, there's a lot of chaos out there, and
Right.
that can wipe you out and take you down.
And the fear that's being put out there, like, right?
So yeah, just realize that there's other ways out there than what we're being told and said, and whatever that looks like.
Right. Well, thank you, Cindy. We'll
Yeah.
see you around, guys. Thank you for watching. We'll definitely be posting more on this content soon. Other than that, we'll see you around in the next one.